So the timing couldn't be more appropriate. The distinguished American academic Deborah Lipstadt has written a seminal work called Antisemitism Here and Now. I'm delighted to say Deborah Lipstadt joins me now. I should call you Professor Lipstadt, of course. Professor, why are you writing this book now? Is it because anti-Semitism is stronger and more dominant than before?
Well, I started writing the book a good 2.5, 3 years ago because I noticed a new surge in anti-Semitism, both on the right and the left. But as I wrote, things seemed to get even worse. And in fact, I had a hard time finishing the book because every day there seemed to be a new incident that needed to be put in there. And finally, my editor said to me, Deborah, you got to hit send in the next 48 hours or we're not going to have the book out in time. So in the very end of August, I pushed send, but the last paragraph I wrote was, it was a hard book to write because I was writing about contemporary issues. I usually write about history. It was a hard book to finish because there were so many things happening. But even though I don't usually predict, I'm a historian, I deal with what was, not what will be, I was willing to predict that by the time the book appeared, something would have happened that should have been included. And I sent it, I guess, September 1, I hit send, and at the end of October came Pittsburgh, so...
You, of course, are based in the United States. Is the rise of Trump and populism on the right, is that in any way responsible for the increase in anti-Semitism in the United States?
It's certainly contributing to it. I don't know if Donald Trump is an anti-Semite or not. I have no idea what's in his heart, and I think that's immaterial. But I do think his rhetoric about swarms of immigrants coming across the border, hordes, to destroy our way of life, to destroy America, the need to make America great by walling it off. All those things contribute to divisions. All those things gin up the far right. They enthuse the far right. And irrespective of what he is or isn't, virtually everyone on the far right believes that he agrees with them in their racist, anti-Semitic views.
The definition of anti-Semitism, I'm sure if we asked some 15-year-old children, they wouldn't know what it was. In fact, we had a school teacher on this programme. She called in a few months ago, and they didn't know. How do you define it?
I'll tell you how I define it. I look for a template, any stereotype, whether it's a homophobic stereotype, an ethnic stereotype, a racist, anti-Semitic stereotype, has certain classic elements associated with it. If I was going to use a stereotype, a racist stereotype in the United States about African Americans, I'd use terms like shiftless, lazy, welfare queens, welfare cheats. Those are the stereotypical, prejudicial stereotypical elements for African American racism of African Americans. For the for the anti-Semitic stereotype, I look for three things. Something to do with money, something to do with intellect, but a conniving kind of intellect, a conniving smarts, not to be trusted, wily, tricky, and a ability to maneuver powerful people, powerful entities to do your bidding. And maybe the element also of what is often called cosmopolitanism. They're not loyal. They're not quite loyal. They're not loyal to anyone but to themselves. So once I find those things, we're not just talking about someone who may dislike a Jew. We're talking about an anti-Semitic stereotype.
The would be easier for people who don't understand anti-Semitism, wouldn't it, if it wasn't even called that? If it was just called Jew-hating, Jew-resenting?
Well, it's interesting. The word anti-Semitism was coined by an anti-Semite at the end of the 19th century in Vienna. He was looking for a word. He didn't want to use the word anti-Judaism. He believed all the changes that were coming. It was the time of the Industrial Revolution, great migration patterns, dislocation, and he thought it was all the fault of the Jews. He didn't want to call it anti-Judaism because he believed that even Jews who converted, even Jews who stopped being overtly Jewish, didn't have any connection to their tradition, still carried this terrible threat to society, to the majority Christian society. So he wanted a bigger word, a more all-encompassing word. He chose anti-Semitism. He created the word. The word was always written as one word, and then I think it was here in the UK, actually, when it was first translated, and some of his articles were translated into English, some publisher put in a hyphen. But it means more than just hatred of the religion, because there are lots of Jews who have no connection to the religion, who have no affiliation, no affinity for the religion, but they're hated because of their heritage.
You, of course, famously crushed David Irving, not a very pleasant man. You beat him in court. The great Holocaust, and I use the word great in inverted commas.
Right.
How important was it to win a battle like that?
I think it was very important. First of all, as you know, and as many of your listeners will know, he sued me for libel. He came after me. I don't believe history belongs in the courtroom. I never would sue someone in that regard. But he sued me for libel, I think thinking I wouldn't fight. I'm on the other side of the pond. I'm a woman, et cetera, et cetera. But I knew I had to fight, because if I didn't fight, if I didn't stand up to defend myself, he would have won by default, because the burden of proof was on me, given British libel law. So I had great lawyers. I had a great research team of historians, and we felt it was very important to win and to demonstrate conclusively that Holocaust denial is really a form of anti-Semitism. It's a form of Jew hatred, and it has more than that even. It has no basis in reality. Think about it. For deniers to be right, who would have to be wrong? All the survivors, all the documents. The Holocaust has the dubious distinction of being the best documented genocide in the world. All the survivors would have to be wrong. All the bystanders who saw these things happening, whether they could do something about it or not, would have to be wrong. The thousands of historians who work in this field here in the United Kingdom, throughout Europe, North America, China, Japan, South America, who work on different aspects, they all would either be part of the hoax or have been duped. And finally, the perpetrators. Germans, the people who took part in it, said it happened. So Holocaust denial makes no sense. There's no contemporary evidence saying that the Holocaust didn't happen. What you have, and what we showed in court by following David Irving's footnotes back to his sources, that he distorted, he lied, he created, he changed dates, all sorts of things. And I think it was very important to show that this is a complete hoax, that there are facts, there are opinions, and there are lies, and this falls into the category of lies.
In your book, you include a chapter, I think, on what's happening in Britain, namely with the leader of the opposition, Jeremy Corbyn. Now, you all probably know what's happened in the last week here. You were talking about how this is a constantly moving story. Jenny Formby, the General Secretary of the Labour Party here, told MPs it's impossible to eradicate anti-Semitism from the Labour Party. And when asked what had been done about disciplinary cases, she said she didn't answer to the MP, she answered to a different committee. Why did you feel it necessary to put Corbyn, that what's happening here, in your book?
Well, I think, first of all, there's great discussion about it. There's great intent. I know the interest. I know here in the UK, not just amongst Jews, but amongst people generally, it's been a matter of great discussion. But I think that on some level, Jeremy Corbyn and the people around him exemplify the progressives' problem with anti-Semitism. They see the world through two lenses: a lens of ethnicity and a lens of privilege. They look at Jews who may come and say, that's an anti-Semitic comment, that's an anti-Semitic remark, or I've been an object of anti-Semitism. And they see white people, not ethnic, not brown, not black, not people of color, which is ironic because to the people on the far right, Jews are not white. You think about the guy in Pittsburgh, he went into the synagogue yelling, "You aren't going to destroy the white people." And they see people of privilege, even though there are many Jews who are not of privilege. So they look and they say, you are not an ethnic minority, you are a person of privilege, you couldn't be an object of prejudice. And on top of that, I, the progressive, whether it's Jeremy Corbyn or anyone else with that particular view, and we have people like that in the United States as well, I am a dyed-in-the-wool progressive. I absorbed progressive values, with my mother's milk. How could you accuse me of that? It's impossible for me to be an anti-Semite, to engage in anti-Semitism. Therefore, you must be doing this for ulterior motives, to win a political position, to score political points, because you're a supporter of Israel, because you don't like my attitude on the Palestinians, whatever it might be. And it's a dangerous thing, and it refuses to take anti-Semitism serious. This attitude refuses to take anti-Semitism seriously, and more than just that. I don't think if a person of African origin or Latino origin, whatever, came and said I was the object of racism, they would say, I'm going to define what racism is. But when the Jew comes, I'm going to define what anti-Semitism. I'm going to determine what anti-Semitism is. Or I'm going to demand of you a loyalty oath, which is also partially an anti-Semitic canard.
I said to some Labour MPs the other night, if your General Secretary had said it's impossible to eradicate anti-Muslim sentiment from this party, there would be an enormous outcry. There isn't an enormous outcry
right.
when she said we cannot eradicate anti-Semitism. How do you react to that?
I think it's outrageous. She may be right on some regard. Anti-Semitism is called the longest hatred, the oldest hatred. It's got long, deep roots in society, not just Western society, but certainly in Western society. It may be impossible to eradicate, but you don't stop trying, especially in your own party, a party which claims values that are so antithetical to prejudice, which wears the cloak very proudly of, we will fight prejudice. And here you say, well, here's a prejudice, we can't fight it, so we're just going to live with it, and that's it. It's an attitude, an absence of outrage that is extremely disturbing. It's a willingness to live with an animus, a hatred, which in many people in the Labour Party's own lifetime, or certainly their parents' lifetime, 75 years ago, led to one of the greatest genocides in history. 1 out of every 3 Jews was murdered. There was an attempt not just to kill Jews in Germany, but from one end of the continent to the other and off the continent. Rhodes, Corfu, Libya. Didn't matter, old, young. And now you're saying, well, we're just going to live with it. Well, she may live with it, but the people who are the objects of it may not live with it.
Is Jeremy Corbyn an anti-Semite, in your view? I
don't know if he's an anti-Semite, and I think that's with all due respect, the wrong question. My question is, the question I ask in the book is, and I ask it of Donald Trump too, not is Jeremy Corbyn or Donald Trump, people on the right, people on the left, not are they anti-Semites, but have they engaged in actions which give comfort to the anti-Semites? Have they engaged in actions which make the anti-Semites feel you're on my side? Have they harbored in their midst people with overtly anti-Semitic views who are Holocaust deniers, who spread the worst kinds of stories and fictions about Jews? That's what I look for. I don't know what's in someone's heart, but I know how they behave.
If I can ask you just finally, do people confuse anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism?
Yes.
And would you explain the difference?
Sure. Look, criticism of Israeli policies is not anti-Semitism. I was just in Stockholm last week, and the Israeli ambassador to Sweden said that before 900 people. Criticism of Israeli policies is not anti-Semitism. You can find criticism of Israeli policies. Go to the Knesset. Go to a debate in the Israeli parliament. You'll hear criticism of Israeli policies. But it's when you have a myopic focus only on Israel, the only country doing wrong in the world, the cause of all the upheaval in the Middle East, and when you question the right of Jews to have a homeland that you would accord to all others, I think then you're crossing the boundary. We have some, in fact, in the House of Representatives in the United States, in the Congress, some people on the left, the far left, who have said, well, Israel shouldn't exist because it's a theocracy and theocracies are outmoded. Well, hello, look at all Israel's neighbors, every single one of Israel's neighbors and many other countries throughout the Middle East and other parts are Muslim theocracies, you know. So it's this singular focus. I just heard an incident in New York. A high school student goes to a public state school in a high school in New York, a very fine one, and she asked her teacher to sign a letter of recommendation for her for a summer program. And he said, of course. And then when he saw it was in Israel, he said, oh, I can't sign it. And by the way, he's Jewish, so it crosses boundaries. And she said, well, why not? He said, oh, because it's in Israel. She said, is there any other country, if I was applying to a program in North Korea, because there are programs where students can go to North Korea. I was applying to a program in Saudi Arabia where I couldn't go out of the compounds of my educational program except if I was dressed in a way that would be acceptable, and I couldn't go out as a woman alone. Would you sign a letter of recommendation for me for that? And he said yes. Something's out of whack.
If I could just, very small indulgence. I know you're a historian. You don't make predictions. Is Donald Trump going to win the next American election?
I don't know. I don't know. If you had asked me about the last one, I would have said no way. So I'm not the right person to ask. I know what I hope, but I don't know what I know.
I suspect I know what you hope, but you're not going to put your money. Great. That is Professor Deborah Lipstadt. Her book is called Antisemitism Here and Now. She's a very distinguished academic. She's the Professor of Modern Jewish History and Holocaust Studies at the Emory University in the United States. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.